The moment I knew I'd been betrayed wasn't when my father announced it to the board. It wasn't when I saw my brother's smug smile from across the conference table. It was 3 weeks earlier, when I caught them both leaving the executive lounge, laughing about something I wasn't meant to hear. They stopped abruptly when they saw me. Dad's eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. Kevin straightened his tie with that nervous tic he'd had since childhood. In that moment, something inside me knew. 15 years of my work, my vision, my sacrifice was about to be handed to someone else. To my brother, who had spent more time on golf courses than construction sites. And I was right. But they never expected what I did next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jennifer Reynolds, and until 3 months ago, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Reynolds Construction, the company my grandfather started as a small residential contractor in 1962, the one my father expanded into commercial projects throughout the Pacific Northwest, and the one I transformed into a $100 million enterprise with projects across 5 states. I still remember the first time Dad took me to a construction site. I was 9 years old, all skinny legs and curious eyes, watching in awe as steel beams swung through the air like giant matchsticks. The foreman handed me a white hard hat that swallowed my head, and Dad laughed, adjusting it so I could see. "One day, Jenny," he said, "all of this will be yours, if you want it." I wanted it. God, I wanted it. By 16, I was spending summers in the office, learning how to read blueprints and decipher contracts. My friends were at the mall. I was at job sites, asking questions about load-bearing walls and foundation requirements. My senior thesis at Stanford was on sustainable construction methods in urban environments. 2 weeks after graduation, I was at my desk at Reynolds Construction, ready to prove myself. And prove myself I did. Not as Richard Reynolds' daughter, but as Jennifer Reynolds, the woman who landed the Miller Tower project that put us on the national map. The executive, who expanded our portfolio into green building when competitors were still debating its value. The leader who guided the company through the 2008 recession without a single layoff while our competitors crumbled. For 15 years, I was the engine of Reynolds Construction's growth. Everyone knew it. Our clients, our team, our competitors. Everyone except apparently my father. The morning of the announcement began like any other. I arrived at our downtown Portland headquarters at 6:30, an hour before most of the executive team. The early morning was my time, quiet, productive, undisturbed. I reviewed the quarterly projections one last time, made notes for the upcoming board meeting, and finalized my presentation for when Dad would officially announce his retirement and name me as his successor. At least, that's what should have happened. My assistant Sarah knocked on my door at 8, coffee in hand. "Morning," she said, setting the cup on my desk. "Ready for the big day?" I smiled, smoothing my blazer. "As ready as I'll ever be." Sarah hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. In 10 years, I'd never seen her nervous around me. "What is it?" I asked. "It's probably nothing." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But Kevin's assistant was making copies of something for the board meeting, a different presentation than the one we prepared. I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sure it's supplemental materials. Thanks for the coffee, Sarah." After she left, I sat motionless, the familiar pressure building at my temples. Kevin had been unusually interested in quarterly numbers lately, asking questions in meetings he normally slept through. Dad had canceled our weekly strategy lunch 3 times in the past month, something he hadn't done in years. I opened my laptop and checked my calendar. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room. Reynolds Construction CEO succession announcement was the only agenda item. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda, our CFO and one of the few executives I trusted implicitly. "Need to talk before the meeting. My office?" I found Linda staring out her window at the Portland skyline, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Close the door," she said without turning around. I did, then waited. Linda and I had started at Reynolds within months of each other. She'd been my ally through countless projects, negotiations, and corporate battles. "Have you spoken to your father today?" she finally asked. "Not yet. Why?" She turned, her expression grave. "The board packet for today's meeting was distributed this morning. I just received my copy." "And?" Linda walked to her desk and handed me a bound presentation. The cover read, "Reynolds Construction Vision 2025, with Kevin's name beneath it as presenter." I flipped through it quickly, my chest tightening with each page. It was essentially my strategic plan from last year, with superficial changes and Kevin's name on the cover. "There's more," Linda said quietly. "The succession recommendation is in the back." I turned to the final section. There it was in black and white. "The board of directors will consider the recommendation to appoint Kevin Reynolds as chief executive officer, effective immediately." The room seemed to tilt slightly. 15 years of work, of sacrifice, of proven results, and my father was giving the company to my brother. "This can't be right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The vote is expected to be a formality. Richard has already secured commitments from the majority." I closed the packet, my mind racing. Does Kevin know? He's been telling his team all morning, very quietly, of course. The betrayal wasn't just that Dad had chosen Kevin, it was that everyone knew before me. I'd been deliberately kept in the dark, as if I were an afterthought in my own company. "What will you do?" Linda asked. It was a good question. What could I do? My father was majority shareholder. The board respected him enough to follow his recommendation without question. I had no leverage, no recourse. Or did I? I handed the packet back to Linda. "Thank you for showing me this." "Jen," she called as I reached the door. "I'm sorry. You deserved better." I nodded once, words momentarily beyond me, and returned to my office. I had 5 hours until the board meeting. 5 hours to decide whether to accept this injustice or fight back. I spent the first hour cycling through emotions, shock, hurt, anger, disbelief, before forcing myself to focus. Emotional reactions wouldn't change anything. I needed clarity, strategy, leverage. I pulled up the company's financial records, annual reports, and project histories. For the past decade, Reynolds Construction had succeeded largely because of my leadership. The Pacific Heights development, our largest current project, had been Kevin's baby, and it was 3 months behind schedule and $2 million over budget. I dug deeper into those numbers. Something about the Pacific Heights reporting had always seemed off. The projected profit margins were suspiciously high for a project facing so many challenges. I cross-referenced the financial statements with the actual construction reports, and there it was, a gap between reality and what was being reported to the board and investors. My hand froze over the keyboard. Was Kevin manipulating the numbers? And if so, did Dad know? I needed more information, and I knew just who to call. Michael Donovan had been pursuing Reynolds Construction for years. His investment firm specialized in construction and real estate companies with strong fundamentals but management issues, companies ripe for restructuring. I'd rebuffed his overtures multiple times, loyal to the family business. But now, my loyalty was being rewarded with betrayal. I found his card in my desk drawer and stared at it for a long moment before picking up my phone. "Jennifer Reynolds," he answered on the second ring, surprise evident in his voice. "This is unexpected." "Michael," I said, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. "I've been reconsidering your interest in Reynolds Construction. Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" A pause. "I can make myself available. Has something changed?" "Let's just say I'm exploring my options. 1 o'clock at Riverside Grill? I'll be there, he replied, curiosity evident in his tone. I hung up, feeling the weight of what I'd just initiated. I wasn't just calling a potential investor. I was making a move that could reshape Reynolds Construction entirely. Was I ready for that? The alternative was to sit quietly while everything I'd built was handed to Kevin, who would run it into the ground within 2 years. I thought of the 500 employees who depended on Reynolds Construction for their livelihoods. I thought of my grandfather who had started this company with nothing but a pickup truck and determination. I thought of the little girl in the too big hard hat who believed her father when he said it would all be hers one day. By the time I walked into the board meeting at 2 p.m., my path was clear. The main conference room fell silent as I entered. The executive team and board members were already seated around the long mahogany table. My father stood at the head, with Kevin to his right, my usual seat. I took the empty chair at the far end, noticing the glances exchanged, the discomfort in some faces, the poorly concealed satisfaction in others. Dad called the meeting to order, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over 40 years in business. Thank you all for being here today. As you know, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've decided it's time for me to step down as CEO of Reynolds Construction. He paused, looking around the room. This company has been my life's work, but it's time for new leadership to take us forward. I sat perfectly still, my expression betraying nothing. Let him say it. Let everyone hear it directly. Reynolds Construction needs a bold new vision, Dad continued. Someone who can think differently, bring fresh ideas. I nearly laughed at that. Kevin had never had an original idea in his life. Every vision he'd ever presented had been borrowed, usually from me. That's why I've decided that Kevin will be taking over as CEO, effective immediately. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, watching for my reaction. I maintained a neutral expression through sheer force of will, even as something burned inside me. Kevin stood buttoning his designer suit jacket. I'm honored, Dad. I won't let you down. I watched as executives who had worked with me for years, who had seen my dedication firsthand, now nodded and smiled, congratulating Kevin. Some couldn't meet my eyes. Others gave me sympathetic glances. Dad finally looked at me. Jennifer will continue as COO, supporting Kevin's transition. Supporting Kevin's transition. After 15 years of running daily operations, expanding our market share, and personally landing the projects that transformed our company, I was being asked to support my brother. As the meeting concluded, Linda caught my eye from across the table, her expression a mix of sympathy and anger on my behalf. I gave her an almost imperceptible nod. This wasn't over. I waited until the room had emptied before approaching my father. He was gathering his notes, deliberately taking his time, perhaps hoping to avoid this very conversation. We need to talk, I said, my voice low. Dad sighed, suddenly looking older than his 68 years. Not now, Jennifer. We'll discuss this later. When? After Kevin's had time to settle into my office? Or after he's run the company into the ground? That's enough. His tone sharpened. This decision wasn't made lightly. Then explain it to me. Help me understand why you'd pass over the person who's actually been running this company for years. Dad straightened, meeting my gaze directly. Kevin needs this opportunity. He needs to prove himself. I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. So this isn't about what's best for Reynolds Construction. It's about what Kevin needs. The company will be fine. You'll be there to guide him. And if I won't? The question hung between us. Dad's expression hardened. Is that a threat, Jennifer? It's a question. What if I don't want to be the safety net for Kevin's inevitable failures? Then you're not the daughter I thought you were, he said quietly. Family supports family. You know that. I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Funny how that obligation only seems to run in one direction. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. You know, Dad, you've spent my entire life telling me that Reynolds Construction is about excellence, about earning your place, about delivering results. I looked back at him. I guess that was a lie. The hurt that flashed across his face gave me no satisfaction. This wasn't about hurting him, it was about saving what I'd helped build. Back in my office, I closed the door and finally allowed myself a moment. My hands shook slightly as I gripped the edge of my desk. Breathe, Jennifer. Think. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Reynolds Construction CEO succession announcement. The company-wide email had already gone out. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Michael Donovan, confirming our lunch and attaching some preliminary information about Reynolds Construction's financials. Specifically, the concerning patterns I'd identified in the Pacific Heights project. As I hit send, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The path ahead would be difficult, possibly destructive. Family relationships might be damaged beyond repair. But I hadn't fought for 15 years to watch everything I'd built be handed to someone who hadn't earned it. Reynolds Construction deserved better. I deserved better. And I was about to prove it. I arrived at Riverside Grill 15 minutes early the next day, requesting a private booth in the back corner. The restaurant was upscale enough to impress without being ostentatious. Neutral territory where business deals were quietly negotiated over expensive steaks and martinis. I ordered sparkling water and studied the menu without seeing it, my mind reviewing the strategy I'd mapped out until 3 a.m. Michael Donovan walked in precisely at 1 p.m. He was tall, mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. His firm, Donovan Capital Partners, had a reputation for identifying undervalued construction and real estate companies, restructuring them, and either selling them at a premium or absorbing them into their growing portfolio. He spotted me and crossed the restaurant with a smile. That didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes were assessing, calculating, looking for weakness or opportunity. Possibly both. Jennifer, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. This is a pleasant surprise. I was beginning to think you'd never return my calls. Times change, Michael. So do circumstances. A server appeared to take his drink order, scotch, neat, and disappeared just as quickly. I heard about the announcement, he said, studying me. Kevin is CEO. That must have been unexpected. I kept my expression neutral. News travels fast. In our industry, always. He leaned back as his drink arrived. I've known your father for 20 years. This doesn't seem like a decision he would make lightly. It wasn't my decision to question, I replied, the practice line rolling off my tongue even as it tasted bitter. Michael smiled. And yet here we are. Here we are, I echoed, opening the portfolio I'd brought. I assume you're still interested in Reynolds Construction. Depends on what's being offered. I slid a single-page summary across the table. These are our current financials: revenue, project portfolio, growth, projections. He glanced at the page, then back at me. I've seen these numbers before. They're impressive, but they don't explain why you're suddenly open to outside investment. I took a sip of water, choosing my next words carefully. Reynolds Construction is at a crossroads. We've grown significantly in the past decade, but to continue that trajectory, we need capital for expansion. Strategic partnerships make sense. Strategic partnerships, he repeated, amusement flickering across his face. Is that what we're discussing? For now. The server returned to take our lunch orders. I chose the salmon. Michael ordered the ribeye, rare. When we were alone again, he leaned forward. "Let's cut through the corporate speak, Jennifer. You've rejected my overtures for years because Reynolds is a family company. Now, the day after your brother is named CEO instead of you, you're suddenly interested in outside investment." His eyes met mine directly. What's really going on? I considered deflecting, but Michael Donovan hadn't built his reputation by being easily misled. Direct honesty might serve me better. Reynolds Construction is facing challenges that aren't reflected in those numbers, I said, tapping the financial summary. Our flagship project, Pacific Heights, is significantly behind schedule and over budget. The financial reporting around it has been creative. His interest visibly sharpened. How creative? Creative enough that if the true numbers were presented to investors or lenders, we'd have serious problems. Michael sat back, taking this in. "And your father knows about this?" "I'm not certain what he knows. Kevin has been running Pacific Heights directly, reporting to Dad and circumventing normal financial protocols." "And you're telling me this because—" I met his gaze steadily. "Because Reynolds Construction is worth saving. It's a solid company with exceptional projects and talented people. But under current leadership, I'm concerned about its future." "So you want Donovan Capital to come in, clean house, and coincidentally install you as CEO?" His tone was skeptical, but not dismissive. "I want a partnership that benefits everyone. My family gets the capital injection needed to stabilize operations. Your firm gets a stake in a company with tremendous growth potential. The employees keep their jobs. The only change would be putting the right leadership in place." Michael swirled his scotch thoughtfully. "And what makes you think your father or brother would agree to this arrangement?" This was the moment of truth, the leverage I'd identified in my late-night strategy session. "Because the alternative is worse," I said quietly. "The Pacific Heights accounting irregularities aren't just bad business practice. They could potentially be construed as fraud. If that information were to become public or reach the SEC..." I let the implication hang between us. Michael's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a calculation being recalibrated. "That's quite an accusation, Jennifer. Against your own family." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact I discovered yesterday. One I'm trying to address privately through a solution that protects the company and everyone associated with it." Our food arrived, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. I wasn't hungry anymore, but I forced myself to take a bite, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. "Let's say I'm interested," Michael finally said. "What exactly are you proposing?" Donovan Capital invests $30 million for a 30% stake in Reynolds Construction. The investment is contingent on governance changes, specifically a restructured board with the power to appoint the CEO based on qualifications and merit, not family ties. "And you believe this board would choose you?" "I believe they would choose the most qualified candidate," I corrected. "If that's not me, I'll accept it. But it won't be Kevin." Michael cut into his steak, considering this. "You understand that if we went this route, your family's control of the company would be diluted. Your father might see this as a betrayal." The word stung, even coming from him. "My father betrayed me first when he put nepotism above the company's well-being." "Family businesses are complicated," Michael observed. "Emotions cloud judgment, which is precisely why objective governance is needed." We finished our lunch discussing details: the valuation methodology, board composition, timing, conditions. Michael was thorough, probing for weaknesses in my proposal and finding remarkably few. By dessert, he was fully engaged, the predatory gleam in his eyes replaced by genuine interest. "I'll need to verify your claims about Pacific Heights," he said as we prepared to leave. Discreetly, of course. I'd expect nothing less. I handed him a thumb drive. These are the actual project reports compared with the financial disclosures. You'll find everything you need to conduct due diligence." He pocketed the drive. "This is a bold move, Jennifer. Are you certain you're prepared for the consequences?" I thought about my father's face when he'd announced Kevin as CEO, the years of being overlooked despite outperforming everyone around me, the employees whose livelihoods depended on competent leadership. "I'm certain that doing nothing would be worse," I replied. Michael nodded. "I'll have my team review this immediately. Expect my call within 48 hours. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, he paused. "One more question. Why me? You could have taken this to any number of investment firms." The question surprised me, but the answer was simple. "Because you understand construction. You know the difference between a company with fundamental problems and one with a leadership issue. And because you've been trying to get a piece of Reynolds for years." I smiled slightly. "I figured you'd move quickly." He laughed, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him. "Smart. I'll be in touch." I watched him walk to his car, the weight of what I'd just done settling over me. There was no turning back now. I had effectively declared war on my own family, in the name of saving what they seemed determined to destroy. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Kevin's calling an executive meeting tomorrow morning. You need to be there. Things are moving fast." I texted back, "So am I." The air in Reynolds Construction felt different when I arrived the next morning. Whispers ceased as I passed. Glances darted away. Word of Kevin's promotion had spread throughout the company, and with it, speculation about my future. I nodded to familiar faces, maintaining a calm exterior that belied the storm within. My assistant Sarah met me at my office door, coffee in hand and concern in her eyes. "Executive meeting in 30 minutes, she said, following me inside. "Conference room A." "Thank you." I took the coffee, noting the extra files on my desk. "What are these?" "Kevin had them sent over. Background materials for the meeting. He wants updates on all current projects." I flipped through the folders. Information I already knew intimately, compiled haphazardly by someone with a surface-level understanding of our operations. "Where is Kevin now?" "In your father's office. I mean, his office now." Sarah shifted, uncomfortably. "There are rumors." "About?" "That you might be leaving. People are worried." I set down the files. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. Not yet, anyway." She seemed relieved. "Good. Because between us, Kevin spent the morning asking basic questions about project workflows that you could answer in your sleep." That didn't surprise me. Despite growing up in the family business, Kevin had never shown interest in its fundamental operations. His expertise was in networking, entertaining clients, and taking credit for others' work, particularly mine. I spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the folders, making notes where I found discrepancies or areas that needed clarification. If Kevin wanted to play CEO, I would ensure he understood exactly what he was getting into. Conference room A was already filling when I arrived. The executive team, department heads, project managers, and directors, gathered around the massive table, with Kevin at the head in our father's usual seat. Dad himself was conspicuously absent. Kevin looked up as I entered, a flicker of uncertainty, crossing his face before he masked it with a smile. "Jennifer, glad you could join us." I took my seat near the middle of the table, rather than my usual place beside the CEO. The symbolic distance was not lost on anyone present. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied evenly. Kevin cleared his throat, adjusting his tie with that nervous tick. "As you all know, I've taken over as CEO following my father's retirement. I've called this meeting to get up to speed on all major projects and initiatives." For the next hour, I watched as Kevin stumbled through what should have been a standard executive review. He asked redundant questions, misunderstood basic project management concepts, and failed to grasp the financial implications of decisions already in motion. The team looked increasingly concerned, several shooting questioning glances my way. When Kevin reached the Pacific Heights development, I straightened in my chair. Pacific Heights is our flagship project, he announced proudly. A $65 million mixed-use development that will redefine urban living in Portland. We're projecting a 22% profit margin upon completion. Linda, our CFO, shifted uncomfortably. Actually, the latest projections are closer to 15%, assuming we resolve the foundation issues by the end of the month. Kevin frowned. That's not what my reports show. Those reports were prepared specially for you, I said, my voice calm but carrying. The standard financial review shows the project is 3 months behind schedule and $2 million over budget. The projected margin is indeed closer to 15%, possibly lower if we face additional delays. The room went silent. Kevin's face flushed. That's simply not accurate, he insisted. Dad and I reviewed the numbers last week. Then you reviewed different numbers than the ones reported to our lenders and investors, I replied. Which raises interesting questions about our financial disclosure practices. The implication hung in the air. Several executives exchanged alarmed glances. Financial reporting discrepancies weren't just bad business, they were potentially illegal. Kevin's jaw tightened. We can discuss this privately, Jennifer. Why? This is an executive meeting to review project status. I'm reviewing the actual status of our largest project. I'm familiar with Pacific Heights. Are you familiar with the stop work order issued yesterday due to insufficient structural engineering documentation? I asked, referencing information I'd received from the site manager that morning. Or the subcontractor payment issues that have 3 vendors threatening to pull their teams? Kevin looked blindsided. Clearly, these updates hadn't made it into his specially prepared reports. I'll address those issues immediately, he managed, trying to regain control of the meeting. Good, I nodded. The team will need clear direction on how to proceed, especially regarding the additional $2 million needed to resolve the foundation problems. The executives were now openly staring, the tension palpable. Kevin was being exposed as dangerously uninformed about the very project he'd been using to boost his credentials. He abruptly changed the subject. Let's move on to the Westlake contract. The remainder of the meeting followed a similar pattern. Kevin presenting an optimistic but inaccurate view, me or another executive clarifying with actual facts, and Kevin growing increasingly defensive. By the end, it was clear to everyone present that the new CEO was out of his depth. As the meeting concluded, Kevin asked me to stay behind. Once the room cleared, his professional facade crumbled. What the hell was that? He demanded. That was an accurate project review, I replied. Something you should probably get comfortable with if you're going to be CEO. You deliberately undermined me in front of the entire executive team. I corrected misinformation. There's a difference. Kevin paced, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. Look, I know you're upset about Dad's decision. This isn't about Dad's decision, I interrupted. This is about the fact that you're presenting fiction as fact. Pacific Heights is in trouble, Kevin. Real trouble. And pretending otherwise won't fix it. He stopped pacing, suspicion dawning in his eyes. Is that why you've been meeting with Michael Donovan? To undermine me? So he knew about the lunch. Interesting. I met with Michael to discuss potential investment opportunities, I said carefully. Reynolds Construction needs capital to address issues like Pacific Heights. We don't need outside investment. We're doing fine. Are we? Because from where I'm standing, we have a major project hemorrhaging money, financial reports that don't match reality, and a new CEO who seems unaware of basic operational challenges. Kevin's expression hardened. Be careful, Jennifer. You're still COO because I allow it. I laughed, a genuine sound of disbelief. Is that a threat? You'd fire me? The person who actually knows how this company functions? If necessary, he said, though his confidence wavered. I gathered my notes and stood to leave. Then you'd better hope Dad's willing to come out of retirement to clean up the mess you'd create, because without me, you wouldn't last a month. Before he could respond, my phone rang. Michael Donovan. I glanced at the screen, then back at Kevin. "Excuse me, I need to take this." I walked out, leaving him fuming in the conference room, and answered the call in the privacy of my office. "Jennifer." Michael's voice was all business. "My teams reviewed the Pacific Heights documentation. You were right. There are significant discrepancies between the internal reports and what's being presented to investors. And we're interested in moving forward. I've had my legal team draft a term sheet for the investment we discussed. Can you meet tomorrow morning?" A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. "Yes. Your office or neutral ground?" "My office would be more private. 9 a.m.? I'll be there." As I hung up, I noticed a text from Linda. "Your brother just stormed into your father's house. All hell about to break loose." Good. It was time for this to come to a head. I spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering additional documentation that supported my position, and reviewing the company bylaws regarding ownership changes and board restructuring. By the time I left the office that evening, I had a comprehensive understanding of every angle of what I was about to attempt. My phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from Dad, no further messages from Kevin. The calm before the storm. At home, I poured a glass of wine and stood by my apartment window, looking out at the Portland skyline. Several of those buildings had been Reynolds construction projects, tangible monuments to what we had built, what I had built. My doorbell rang at 8:30 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw my father standing in the hallway, looking every one of his 68 years. I opened the door without a word, stepping aside to let him in. "Jennifer," he said, voice rough with emotion or fatigue or both. "Dad, wine?" "Something stronger if you have it." I poured him a whiskey and we sat in my living room, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Kevin tells me you met with Donovan," he finally said. "I did." "Why?" "I studied him, this man I'd spent my life trying to impress, to make proud. Because someone needs to save Reynolds Construction from your mistake." He flinched. "That's unfair." "Is it? You gave the company to someone who has manipulated financial reports, misrepresented project status, and has no idea how to actually run a construction business. How is that unfair?" Dad set down his glass. "Kevin made some aggressive projections on Pacific Heights. That's not unusual in our business." "These aren't aggressive projections, Dad. They're fabrications. The project is months behind schedule and millions over budget. The reports Kevin showed you bear no resemblance to reality." "And you took this information to an outside investor?" Anger crept into his voice. "Your own family business?" "I took a solution to someone who can help. Donovan Capital is prepared to invest $30 million in Reynolds Construction. That money would stabilize Pacific Heights and fund the expansion we've been planning for years." Dad's eyes narrowed. "What's the catch?" "Governance changes. A restructured board with the power to appoint the CEO based on qualifications, not family ties." Understanding dawned on his face. "So that's it. You couldn't accept my decision, so you're staging a corporate coup." "I'm saving the company you spent your life building," I countered. "The company you're apparently willing to sacrifice for Kevin's ego." "You don't understand? Then help me understand." My composure finally cracked. "Help me understand why you would pass over someone who has proven herself for 15 years in favor of someone who has never successfully completed a single project." Dad stood, pacing as Kevin had earlier, the family resemblance suddenly striking. "Kevin needs this opportunity, Jennifer. You've always been the strong one, the capable one. You'll be fine no matter what." The words hit me like a slap. So I'm being punished for my competence? For working harder, achieving more? It's not punishment. It's sexism, Dad. Plain and simple. If I were your son and Kevin your daughter, we wouldn't be having this conversation. He stopped pacing, genuine shock on his face. That's not true. This isn't about gender. Isn't it? Kevin needs this opportunity. You'll be fine no matter what. Would you ever say that to a son who had earned the position through years of dedicated service? Dad sank back into his chair. You're twisting my words. I'm hearing them clearly for the first time. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Michael Donovan to finalize the investment terms. The deal will include conditions about board composition and governance. When the board votes on the CEO position, it will be based on qualifications and track record, not family dynamics. I won't allow it, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. You don't have a choice. The alternative is watching Kevin run the company into the ground, possibly facing SEC investigations for financial misrepresentation. Is that the legacy you want? He stared at me. This daughter he'd never truly seen. You would do this? Risk everything we've built on a power play? I'm not the one who put the company at risk, I said quietly. You did that when you chose Kevin. Dad finished his whiskey in a single swallow and stood. I thought I knew you better than this, Jennifer. Funny, I thought the same about you. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of what was happening pressing down on me. Tomorrow would change everything. My relationship with my family, my role at Reynolds Construction, my future. There would be no going back. I thought of the little girl in the hard hat, believing her father when he said it would all be hers one day. I thought of the woman who had proven herself time and again, only to be overlooked because of outdated ideas about who deserved power and who didn't. No more, I whispered to the empty room. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from Robert Chen, the developer on the Pacific Heights project. Heard you're making moves. We should talk. I have information you might find useful. Curious. Chen had always been Kevin's contact, deliberately, kept separate from me despite my role as COO. What information could he have that would be useful to me now? I replied, when and where? His response came quickly. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., coffee shop on 4th and Pine. An hour before my meeting with Michael. It could work. I'll be there, I texted back. Whatever Chen had to say, it might provide additional leverage in the increasingly complex chess game I was playing. And in this game, I couldn't afford to overlook any potential advantage. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep, my mind racing with contingencies, strategies, and the echo of my father's disappointed voice. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that matched my mood. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit with a deep blue blouse, professional, powerful, but not trying too hard. The image I presented today would matter almost as much as the words I spoke. The coffee shop on 4th and Pine was a small, upscale establishment frequented by business professionals. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a cappuccino, and selected a table in the back corner with a view of both the entrance and the street outside. Robert Chen walked in at precisely 8 a.m., scanning the room before spotting me. He was younger than I'd expected, early 30s, sharp features, expensive watch. He ordered at the counter before joining me. Jennifer Reynolds, he said, extending his hand. Finally, we meet in person. I shook it briefly. Mr. Chen, you said you have information. He smiled, seemingly amused by my directness. Not one. For small talk. I appreciate that. I have another meeting shortly. Let's get to the point. Chen nodded, lowering his voice. I understand you're pursuing outside investment from Donovan Capital. An interesting move, considering the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? The discrepancies in the Pacific Heights reporting, the convenient promotion of your brother despite his limited qualifications. I kept my expression neutral. And this concerns you because? Because Kevin Reynolds has been pushing me to cut corners on Pacific Heights for months. Cheaper materials, reduced safety measures, expedited timelines, without proper engineering reviews. This was worse than I'd thought. Not just financial misrepresentation, but potentially dangerous construction practices. Do you have documentation of these requests? Chen smiled. Of course. I document everything, especially when dealing with clients who might become problematic. And you're bringing this to me now because? Self-preservation, he said simply. The foundation issues we're experiencing aren't accidental. They're the direct result of following your brother's demands to reduce costs. When those issues eventually become public, and they will, I don't intend to be the scapegoat. The server delivered Chen's espresso. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of the cup. What exactly are you offering, Mr. Chen? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thumb drive. Emails, text messages, meeting recordings, everything. Documenting your brother's role in creating the problems at Pacific Heights, including his explicit instructions to misrepresent the project status to the board and investors. I stared at the small device being slid across the table. This was potentially explosive, evidence not just of incompetence, but of deliberate malfeasance. Why bring this to me instead of going directly to the board, or my father? Chen's expression hardened slightly. Your father has made it clear he's backing Kevin regardless of the facts. As for the board, I'm a contractor, Ms. Reynolds. I depend on relationships in this industry. Being seen as a whistleblower wouldn't serve my long-term interests. But giving me ammunition against my brother would? I'm giving you information you need to make informed decisions about the future of Reynolds Construction. He shrugged. How you use it is your business. I picked up the thumb drive, weighing it, and its implications in my palm. What do you want in return? Continued contracts with Reynolds Construction, regardless of who ends up in charge. And assurance that when the Pacific Heights issues become public, the responsibility lands where it belongs, with Kevin's decisions, not my company's execution. Reasonable requests, all things considered. If the information here is as significant as you suggest, and if it's verifiable, I don't see why those conditions would be a problem. Chen seemed satisfied. It's all verifiable. Your IT department can confirm the email metadata. The texts speak for themselves. I pocketed the thumb drive. I'll review this immediately. One more thing, Chen said as I prepared to leave. The structural issues at Pacific Heights are worse than anyone has publicly acknowledged. Without immediate intervention, we're looking at potential safety hazards, not just budget overruns. This stopped me cold. How bad? Bad enough that I've quietly instructed my team to document everything in case of future litigation. His expression was grim. The foundation won't support the full weight of the building as currently designed. We need significant remediation work, possibly a complete redesign of certain elements. Why wasn't this flagged earlier? It was in reports your brother buried. Chen finished his espresso. Check the drive. It's all there. I left the coffee shop with my mind racing. If Chen's claims were accurate, the situation was far more serious than financial mismanagement. Pacific Heights could become a public safety issue, a potential disaster with Reynolds Construction's name attached to it. My meeting with Michael Donovan took on new urgency. This wasn't just about correcting a succession mistake anymore. It was about preventing a catastrophe. Donovan Capital occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, the offices sleek and modern with views of the Willamette River. Michael's assistant escorted me directly to his private conference room, where he waited with 2 other people, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s introduced as Helen Morris, the firm's legal counsel, and James Patterson, their chief financial analyst. "Jennifer," Michael greeted me. "Thank you for coming. Before we begin, can I offer you coffee?" "No, thank you." I set my portfolio on the table. "I'd like to get straight to business." Michael nodded approvingly. "Then let's begin. We've prepared a term sheet based on our discussions." Helen slid a document across the table. I skimmed the first page, noting the major points. $30 million investment for a 30% stake, 2 board seats for Donovan Capital, governance restructuring, that would require the CEO to be approved by a supermajority of the board. "This aligns with what we discussed," I acknowledged. "There's one additional condition," Michael said. "Given the concerns about Pacific Heights, we would require a complete independent audit of all Reynolds construction projects and financials before the deal closes." I nodded. "That's reasonable. In fact, it's necessary." I pulled out the thumb drive Chen had given me. "I've just received additional information about Pacific Heights that makes the situation even more urgent." I explained what Chen had told me, watching their reactions shift from professional interest to genuine concern. "If these allegations are accurate," Helen said, "we're looking at potential liability issues far beyond financial misreporting." "I'm aware," I replied. "That's why this investment needs to happen quickly. Reynolds Construction needs both the capital and the governance changes to address these issues properly." Michael connected the thumb drive to his laptop, and we spent the next hour reviewing its contents. The evidence was damning. Explicit emails from Kevin demanding cost-cutting measures despite engineering warnings, text messages instructing Chen to find a way to make it work when structural concerns were raised, and most damaging, a recorded conversation where Kevin directed the financial team to massage the numbers for the board presentation. "This is worse than we anticipated," Michael said finally, closing the laptop. "Your brother has created a significant liability for Reynolds Construction, which is why the governance changes are non-negotiable," I emphasized. "Reynolds needs leadership that will address these issues transparently and effectively." "Agreed," Helen nodded. "But there's a more immediate concern. If the structural issues at Pacific Heights are as severe as Mr. Chen suggests, there may be legal obligations to disclose this information to regulatory authorities." She was right. Construction defects that potentially affected public safety couldn't be handled quietly as an internal matter. "I understand," I said. "Once the investment is secured and leadership changes are implemented, full transparency with regulatory bodies would be my first priority." Michael studied me thoughtfully. "You realize what this means for your family relationships? Particularly with your brother?" "I do." The weight of it settled on my shoulders. "But Reynolds Construction employs over 500 people. Their livelihoods, and potentially their safety, matter more than family dynamics." "Well said." Michael turned to his colleagues. "Let's revise the timeline. How quickly can we execute this agreement?" "If Ms. Reynolds can secure her father's signature as majority shareholder, we could close within a week," Helen replied. That was the challenge. Dad had made his feelings clear last night. Getting him to agree to this deal would require leverage I wasn't sure I had, even with Chen's evidence. "I'll need time to approach my father with this information," I said. "The shock value may be necessary to gain his cooperation." Michael nodded. "We'll finalize the paperwork today. You focus on securing your father's agreement." As the meeting concluded, Michael walked me to the elevator. "Jennifer," he said quietly when we were alone, "are you absolutely certain this is the path you want to take? There's no going back from here." I thought of the decades I'd spent proving myself, the reward that had been snatched away, and now the genuine danger Kevin's incompetence had created. "I'm certain," I replied. "Reynolds Construction deserves better leadership than it's currently getting. The employees deserve better. The clients deserve better. And you deserve the position you've earned," he added, surprising me. This isn't just about me. No, he agreed. But it's not wrong to acknowledge that justice is part of the equation. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, turning to face him. I'll call you after I speak with my father. Good luck, he said as the doors closed. I was going to need it. I drove directly to my father's house from the Donovan Capital offices, the term sheet and Chen's thumb drive secure in my portfolio. The familiar tree-lined street in Portland's West Hills looked exactly as it always had, peaceful, affluent, unchanged, just like my father's thinking. The house itself was a modernist masterpiece my parents had commissioned 20 years ago, all clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and natural materials that melded with the forested surroundings. Dad had overseen the construction personally, one of the projects that had established Reynolds Construction as more than just another contractor. I parked in the circular driveway behind a car I didn't recognize. Sleek, German, probably Kevin's latest indulgence. So he was here already. That complicated things, but didn't change my approach. The housekeeper let me in with a warm smile, informing me that Mr. Reynolds and Kevin are in the study. I nodded my thanks and made my way through the soaring main hall, past the living room where family photos chronicled our history. Me at graduation, Kevin at his first job, Mom and Dad on their 30th anniversary. The perfect family narrative, carefully curated. Voices drifted from the study, Kevin's, rising in agitation, Dad's lower, attempting to calm. I paused outside the door, listening. She's trying to undermine me, Kevin was saying. Meeting with Donovan, questioning my decisions in front of the entire executive team. She's not just upset, Dad. She's actively sabotaging me. Jennifer's always been intense about the business, Dad replied. Give her time to adjust. Time? She's meeting with corporate raiders. What do you think she's telling them about the company? About me? I chose that moment to enter, pushing the door open without knocking. Both men turned sharply, Kevin's face flushing when he saw me. The truth, I said calmly. I'm telling them the truth. Dad stood from behind his desk, his expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. Jennifer, I didn't know you were coming over. Clearly, I set my portfolio on the edge of his desk. But we need to talk, and it seems I've arrived at the perfect time. Kevin glared at me. Eavesdropping now? Hard to avoid when you're shouting. I turned to Dad. I had an interesting meeting this morning. 2, actually. If you're here about Donovan Capital, Dad began. I am, but also about Robert Chen. Kevin's expression shifted subtly, surprise, then poorly concealed alarm. Interesting. The Pacific Heights developer? Dad frowned. What about him? I opened my portfolio and removed Chen's thumb drive, placing it carefully on the desk. Chen provided me with some illuminating information about the Pacific Heights project, specifically about instructions he received from Kevin regarding materials, safety measures, and financial reporting. That's confidential business information, Kevin said quickly. Chen had no right. Actually, he had every right, I interrupted. Especially given the nature of the instructions and their potential legal implications. Dad's frown deepened as he looked between us. What are you talking about? Kevin has been instructing Chen to cut corners on structural elements of Pacific Heights, despite engineering warnings about safety concerns. He's also directed the financial team to misrepresent the project's status to the board and investors. I kept my voice even, factual. All of it documented in emails, texts, and recorded conversations. All of it on this drive. Kevin shot to his feet. That's a lie. Chen is trying to cover his own incompetence by blaming me. Shall we review the evidence together? I asked, gesturing to Dad's computer. The emails where you specifically instruct Chen to find cheaper alternatives to the load-bearing supports? The texts where you tell him to handle the engineering concerns quietly? Or perhaps the recorded meeting where you direct the finance team to massage the numbers for presentation to the board? The color drained from Kevin's face. Dad looked stricken. Is this true, Kevin? Of course not, Kevin scoffed, but his confidence was crumbling. Chen's manipulating old conversations, taking things out of context. There's only one context for instructing someone to misrepresent financial information to investors, I said quietly. It's called fraud. Dad sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Let me see. I connected the thumb drive to his computer and pulled up the first of the damning emails. We sat in silence as Dad read through message after message, his expression growing more grave with each revelation. Kevin paced behind us, alternating between defensive explanations and angry accusations about Chen's motives. Finally, Dad leaned back, removing his reading glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Kevin, why? The simple question hung in the air. Kevin stopped pacing. The project needed to move forward. We were facing delays, cost overruns. If we reported the actual numbers, the board might have pulled funding. So you lied, Dad said flatly. To me, to the board, to our investors. I made decisions to protect the project. Kevin's voice rose again. Every developer makes these kinds of calls. Not about structural safety, I interjected. Not when lives could be at risk. Dad turned to me, his expression hardening. And your solution to this is Donovan Capital? Selling a stake in our family company to outsiders? My solution is saving Reynolds Construction from a leadership disaster and potential legal catastrophe. I placed the term sheet beside the computer. Donovan is prepared to invest $30 million for a 30% stake. That capital would address the Pacific Heights issues properly and fund our expansion plans. The agreement includes governance changes, specifically, a restructured board with the authority to appoint the CEO based on qualifications, not family sentiment. Kevin laughed bitterly. And there it is. This whole thing is just a power play to get the job Dad gave to me. This whole thing is about preventing Reynolds Construction from becoming the next cautionary tale in the industry, I shot back. A family company destroyed by nepotism and incompetence. That's enough, both of you. Dad's voice cut through our argument. He studied the term sheet, his face unreadable. 30% is a significant dilution of our family's control. It's better than bankruptcy, I said bluntly. Or worse, liability for structural failures that could harm people. Dad stood and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens my mother had once tended with such care. The silence stretched, Kevin and I waiting for his verdict like children called to account. The Pacific Heights issues need to be addressed immediately, he finally said, regardless of how we proceed with Donovan. Agreed, I said. But we need both the capital and the governance changes to ensure this doesn't happen again. Dad turned back to face us. And if I refuse? What then, Jennifer? You take this information to the board? To regulators? The question wasn't hostile, merely resigned, as if he already knew the answer. I hope it doesn't come to that, I said softly. But Reynolds Construction is bigger than any one of us. It employs hundreds of people. It builds structures that thousands of people use every day. Its integrity matters more than family politics. Kevin shook his head in disgust. Listen to yourself. You'd destroy our family over a job title. This isn't about a title, I snapped, my composure finally cracking. This is about responsibility, about earning your position through work and merit, not birthright. Something you've never understood. Both of you, stop. Dad held up a hand. I need time to consider this, and to verify Chen's allegations independently. I nodded. The term sheet is good for 72 hours. After that, Donovan may reconsider given the potential liabilities involved. Dad looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, respect, resignation, or some combination of all three. You've always been strategic, Jennifer. Single-minded. He gestured to the term sheet and thumb drive. Leave these with me. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. It wasn't the immediate agreement I'd hoped for, but it was better than outright rejection. I gathered my portfolio and stood to leave. Think carefully, Dad, I said at the door. This isn't just about who leads Reynolds Construction. It's about what kind of company it will be going forward. Kevin remained behind as I left, no doubt. Planning his counter-strategy. Let him try. The facts spoke for themselves now. The following morning dawned clear and crisp, Portland's skyline sharp against a rare, cloudless sky. I arrived at the office early as usual, using the quiet hours to prepare for whatever Dad's decision might be. If he agreed to the Donovan investment, we would need a transition plan. If he refused, well, I had contingencies prepared for that scenario too. Linda found me reviewing project reports at my desk, a cup of coffee gone cold beside me. You look like you haven't slept, she observed, closing my office door behind her. Not much, I admitted. Dad's considering the Donovan offer. He's also reviewing evidence of Kevin's mismanagement of Pacific Heights. Linda's eyebrows rose. That explains why Kevin's office is dark this morning. What's your next move? Depends on Dad's decision. I rubbed my temples. How's the team reacting to yesterday's executive meeting? Concerned. Linda took the seat across from me. Everyone saw Kevin's lack of grasp on basic operations. The project managers are coming to me with questions they'd normally bring to you or your father. And Pacific Heights? That's why I'm here. She handed me a folder. The structural engineers submitted their latest assessment this morning. It's worse than we thought. They're recommending a complete work stoppage until the foundation issues can be properly addressed. I flipped through the report, my stomach, tightening at phrases like potential catastrophic failure and significant safety risk. Has Kevin seen this? Linda shook her head. It came directly to me. I haven't shared it yet. Smart woman. Had this gone to Kevin first, it might have conveniently disappeared. Make copies, I instructed. Send one to my father immediately, one to our legal department, and keep the original secure. And Kevin? I considered this. Send it to him after the others have received their copies. Include a note that the engineering team is preparing recommendations for remediation. Linda nodded, understanding the strategy. What about the board? They should know about this. One step at a time. Let's see how Dad responds to the Donovan offer first. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Channel 8 business reporter asking questions about Pacific Heights delays says they received an anonymous tip about structural issues. How should we respond? PR. My heart rate accelerated. Someone had leaked the information to the media already. Was it Chen covering his bases? Kevin trying to get ahead of the story? Or someone else entirely? I forwarded the text to Linda. This complicates things. She read it with a frown. We need to get ahead of this. A proactive statement about conducting routine structural reviews would be better than appearing to hide problems. Agreed. Have PR draft something that acknowledges the review without confirming specific issues. Emphasize our commitment to safety and quality standards. I checked the time. I need to call Dad. This changes the timeline. After Linda left, I dialed my father's cell phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice weary. Jennifer, I was just about to call you. The structural engineer's report came in this morning, I said without preamble. It confirms Chen's claims about the foundation issues. They're recommending a complete work stoppage. A long silence. I saw the report. Linda sent it over. There's more. Channel 8 is asking questions. Someone tipped them off about structural problems at Pacific Heights. Another pause. It wasn't you? The question stung, but I understood why he'd ask. No, I have nothing to gain from taking this public before we have a solution in place. Kevin says the same thing. I bit back a retort about Kevin's credibility at this point. Regardless of who leaked it, we need to address both the engineering concerns and the potential PR crisis immediately. The Donovan investment would provide the capital needed for proper remediation. I've been up all night reviewing the emails and reports, Dad said, his voice heavy. Kevin was reckless, irresponsible, but bringing in outside investors is the best option we have. I finished for him. Dad, this isn't just about who's in charge anymore. Pacific Heights has genuine structural issues that could affect public safety. We need the capital and the governance changes to address this properly. The line went quiet again. I could almost see him sitting in his study, weighing decades of family tradition against hard financial and safety realities. All right, he finally said. I'll sign the term sheet, but I want some amendments. Relief washed over me, immediately, followed by wariness. What amendments? First, I want a right of first refusal if Donovan ever decides to sell their stake. The family should have the option to buy it back. Reasonable enough. I'm sure that can be arranged. What else? Second, I want Kevin to remain on the board even after the restructuring. He needs to learn from this, not be cast aside entirely. I hesitated. Having Kevin involved in governance at all seemed risky given his track record, but this was clearly important to Dad. He can have a board seat, but no executive role until the board determines he's ready. A compromise I could live with. Anything else? Yes, the most important condition. Dad's voice strengthened. Before any vote on the CEO position, I want a formal succession plan developed and approved by the board, one that outlines clear criteria for leadership positions and how decisions will be made in the future. No more of this uncertainty. This surprised me. It was actually a good idea, one that would protect Reynolds Construction from similar situations in the future. I think that's an excellent condition, I said sincerely. I'll have it added to the term sheet. Good. Dad sounded relieved, as if having secured these points made the larger concession more palatable. Have Donovan's people prepare the final documents. I'll sign them tomorrow. As I hung up, a mixture of emotions washed over me. Relief, vindication, and a touch of sadness that it had come to this. The company would be saved, but family relationships might never be the same. My office door opened without a knock. Kevin stood there, his face flushed with anger. Happy now? He demanded. Dad just called me, told me he's signing with Donovan. I kept my voice level. It's the right decision for Reynolds Construction. It's the right decision for Jennifer Reynolds, he spat back. You couldn't stand that Dad chose me instead of you, so you manufactured this crisis. I didn't manufacture the structural issues at Pacific Heights, I said calmly. I didn't fabricate the emails where you instructed Chen to cut corners, and I certainly didn't tip off Channel 8 about potential safety concerns. Kevin's expression shifted subtly at the mention of the media leak. Interesting. You've wanted control of this company since we were kids, he said, his voice lower now. Always Dad's perfect little protege, following him around job sites, staying late at the office, making sure everyone knew how dedicated you were. That's called working, Kevin. You should try it sometime. His laugh was bitter. You think I don't work? You think it's easy maintaining the relationships that bring in half our contracts? While you're crunching numbers in your office, I'm the one taking clients to dinner, playing golf with investors, keeping the deals flowing. And that's valuable, I acknowledged, surprising him. Your social skills and network are assets to Reynolds Construction, but they don't qualify you to run a $100 million company with complex operations and hundreds of employees. So what happens now? You take over and I get pushed aside? Forgotten? The genuine hurt in his voice gave me pause. Behind the arrogance and entitlement, Kevin was still my brother. Still the kid who used to follow me around construction sites, asking endless questions about bulldozers and cranes. No, I said more gently. Dad insisted you remain on the board. You'll still have input on company direction. And if you're willing to actually learn the operational side of the business, really learn it, not just delegate it, there could be a path back to an executive role eventually. Kevin stared at me, clearly not having expected this concession. You'd support that? If you earned it? Yes. I met his gaze directly. That's the point, Kevin. Positions should be earned through demonstrated capability, not given as birthright. He was quiet. For a moment, processing this. The board will choose you as CEO, won't they? Most likely, I acknowledged. But even that will require a formal presentation of qualifications and vision. Nothing is being handed to me either. Kevin moved to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline, the same view I contemplated every morning. So many of those buildings bore the Reynolds construction logo during their creation. I really thought I could do it, he said quietly, almost to himself. That if I had the chance, I could step up. Maybe you could have, with the right preparation. I joined him at the window. But not by cutting corners and hiding problems. That's not leadership, Kevin. That's self-preservation. He nodded slowly, a reluctant acknowledgement. So, what happens with Pacific Heights? It's a disaster waiting to happen. We fix it, I said simply. Properly this time, with full transparency and whatever resources are required. The Donovan investment will provide the capital we need. And the media? We get ahead of the story. Announce that routine engineering reviews identified potential issues, and we're proactively addressing them to ensure the highest safety standards. No finger-pointing, no blame, just responsible corporate action. Kevin glanced at me with a hint of admiration. You've thought of everything, haven't you? It's my job. I smiled slightly. It always has been. A knock at the door interrupted us. Sarah stood there, looking apologetic. Sorry to disturb you, but Michael Donovan is on line 1. He says it's urgent. I nodded my thanks and moved to my desk. Kevin remained by the window, clearly not intending to leave during the call. Michael, I answered, putting the phone on speaker as a courtesy to Kevin. I was just about to call you. My father has agreed to the investment terms, with a few minor conditions we should discuss. That's good news, Michael replied, his voice tight. But we have a more immediate concern. The Pacific Heights situation has escalated. A structural engineer who conducted the recent assessment apparently shared his findings with a former colleague at the building department. They're sending inspectors to the site this afternoon. My stomach dropped. Government inspectors meant official reports, potential citations, maybe even fines or legal consequences. How did you hear about this? I asked. One of our associates serves on a city advisory board. He got a heads up from someone in the department. Michael paused. Jennifer, this changes the risk profile of our investment. We'll need to discuss adjustments to the terms. Kevin's face had gone pale. Government inspections of a project, with known structural defects he had essentially ordered, could have personal legal implications for him. I understand, I told Michael. Let's meet this afternoon to discuss the modifications. In the meantime, we need to prepare for the inspection and coordinate our response. 3 o'clock at our offices? I'll be there. I hung up and looked at Kevin. This is why transparency matters from the beginning. Problems don't just disappear because we ignore them. He nodded, a new sobriety in his expression. What do we do now? First, we call our legal team. Then we contact the site manager at Pacific Heights and make sure they're prepared for the inspection. After that, we draft a statement acknowledging the structural review and our commitment to addressing any issues identified. And me? Kevin asked. What's my role in this? It was a fair question, one that showed more self-awareness than I'd expected from him. You know the project details better than anyone, I said. Work with the legal team to prepare a complete timeline of decisions and changes. Full transparency now is our best defense against worse consequences later. Kevin straightened, nodding. I can do that. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. I'm sorry, Jen. Not for wanting to be CEO. I still think I could have grown into it. But for the shortcuts, for not listening to the engineers, that was arrogant. It was perhaps the first genuine apology I'd ever heard from him. We'll fix it, I said again. Together. After he left, I sat at my desk, the weight of the day's developments settling on my shoulders. The path forward was clearer now, but not easier. Government inspections, media inquiries, investment terms to renegotiate, a board to restructure, a company to save. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to optimism. Not because I would likely become CEO, though that validation meant more than I cared to admit, but because Reynolds Construction might emerge from this crisis stronger, more transparent, better governed. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Need to talk before your meeting with Donovan. Come by the house at 2. I texted back my agreement and began preparing for what would undoubtedly be a pivotal afternoon. The next few hours would determine not just my future with Reynolds Construction, but the company's very survival. And I was ready. Dad's house felt unusually quiet when I arrived at 2 p.m. The housekeeper informed me he was waiting in the garden, his thinking place, where he'd always retreated when facing difficult decisions. I found him seated on the stone bench beneath the Japanese maple he'd planted when I was born, its crimson leaves catching the afternoon light. You look like your mother, he said without turning as I approached. She had that same determined walk when she was about to change someone's mind. I sat beside him, the familiar scent of his aftershave mingling with the garden's earthy fragrance. Have I changed yours? He smiled faintly. You've forced me to see things I've been avoiding. He gestured to a folder on the bench between us. I spent the morning going through every document from Chen, then called in our independent engineers to verify the findings. And you were right. The admissions seemed to cost him. The structural issues at Pacific Heights are real and severe. Kevin's instructions to cut corners, misrepresent findings, it's all there in black and white. I nodded, letting him continue rather than saying, I told you so. I've been thinking about why I chose Kevin, he said, surprising me with his candor. It wasn't just because he's my son, though that's what I told myself. It was because he's like me, or rather, like I was at his age. Charismatic, bold, willing to take risks. Those can be valuable qualities, I acknowledged. In moderation, with wisdom to temper them. Dad's weathered hands clasped together. I saw myself in him, and I wanted to believe he would grow into the role as I did. But there's a crucial difference. What's that? I had your mother. His voice softened at the memory. She was my ballast, my conscience, my reality check. She kept me from my worst impulses, forced me to think beyond the next deal, the next project. Kevin has never had that. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had in years. And me? Dad turned to face me, really looking at me. You're what Reynolds Construction needs now, what it's always needed if I'm being honest. You have your mother's integrity and my ambition, but without my recklessness. The validation I'd sought for so long landed with surprising weight. Then why didn't you choose me from the start? Because I'm an old man with old biases I didn't want to admit even to myself. He sighed. And because I worried about Kevin. about what would happen to him if he didn't have the company to ground him. "That's not my responsibility," I said. Gently. "Or the company's. No, it's mine." Dad straightened, his decision apparently made. "I've signed the term sheet with your amendments. Donovan Capital gets their stake, and Reynolds Construction gets proper governance." Relief washed through me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." His expression turned serious. "This means significant changes for all of us. The family's controlling interest will be diluted. The board will be restructured. And when they choose, the next CEO, which I assume will be you, both Kevin and I will have to accept that decision." "Can you?" I asked, the question hanging between us. "Can you truly accept me leading the company you built?" Dad's eyes, so like my own, held mine steadily. "I built the foundation, Jennifer. You've been building the actual structure for years now. It's time I acknowledge that." The words healed something in me I hadn't realized was still wounded. Not completely, but enough. "What about Kevin?" I asked. Dad's expression clouded. "He's not taking this well. When I told him this morning that I was signing with Donovan, he stormed out. Said he needed to handle some things." A note of concern entered his voice, and I shared it. Kevin, feeling cornered and desperate, could be unpredictable. "Has he been in touch since?" Dad shook his head. "No, but we have more immediate concerns. The building inspectors are at Pacific Heights as we speak, and Michael called to say the news is about to break." "Which news?" "All of it, apparently. The structural issues, the leadership change, the Donovan investment. Someone's been talking to the Portland Business Journal. They're running the story this afternoon." My mind raced. A public revelation now, before we had our response prepared, could crater confidence in Reynolds Construction. "We need to get ahead of this," I said, standing. "Issue a statement confirming the structural review at Pacific Heights and our proactive steps to address any issues. Position the Donovan investment as a strategic growth partnership. Make it clear that these are signs of responsible corporate governance, not crisis management." Dad nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Already thinking like a CEO." "I've had practice," I replied with a small smile. "I'll head to the office to coordinate the response. You should join me. The team needs to see us presenting a united front." He stood, brushing invisible dust from his slacks. "Let me change first. And Jennifer..." "Yes?" "Whatever happens next, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've built with Reynolds, but for having the courage to stand up for what's right, even against me." The words caught me off guard, emotion welling unexpectedly. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." By the time we reached Reynolds Construction headquarters, the situation had escalated beyond what either of us had anticipated. The lobby was buzzing with nervous energy. Employees gathered in small clusters, conversations halting abruptly as we walked through. Linda met us at the elevator, her normally composed face tense. "Thank God you're here. It's chaos." "What happened?" I asked as we stepped into the elevator. "Kevin happened," she said grimly. "He called an impromptu staff meeting an hour ago, told everyone that the company was being sold to outsiders, that you had orchestrated a hostile takeover, and that half the staff would likely be laid off once Donovan took control." My stomach dropped. That's completely false. Obviously. But he's the CEO, so people believed him. Then he left, saying he was taking care of loose ends. The panic started immediately after. Dad's face had gone pale. "Where is he now?" "No one knows. He's not answering his phone." The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. That's not all. The Portland Business Journal just published their story online. It mentions the Pacific Heights structural issues, Kevin's role in covering them up, and a pending leadership change at Reynolds. We stepped into a storm. The executive suite was in disarray, phones ringing constantly, team leaders demanding answers, the PR department trying desperately to formulate a response. "Conference room now," I said to Linda. "Get the executive team, PR, and legal. We need a coordinated response." Dad touched my arm. "What about Kevin?" The concern in his voice was genuine, and I softened. "Let me handle the company response. You try to reach him. Make sure he's okay." He nodded gratefully and stepped away, phone already to his ear. The next hour was a blur of strategic decisions and crisis management. With the executive team assembled, I laid out what was happening and what we needed to do. "First, let's be clear about what's true and what isn't," I began. "Reynolds Construction is not being sold. Donovan Capital is making a strategic investment for a minority stake. No layoffs are planned. In fact, the capital injection will allow us to expand operations." The tension in the room eased slightly. "Second, yes, there are structural issues at Pacific Heights that we're addressing proactively. The building inspectors are on site now, and we're cooperating fully. Our priority is ensuring the project is completed safely and to the highest standards." I nodded to our PR director. "We need a comprehensive statement addressing both the investment and the Pacific Heights situation. Position this as Reynolds Construction taking proactive steps to ensure quality, safety, and future growth. Emphasize continuity and stability." "What about the CEO situation?" someone asked. "The article mentions a leadership change." I glanced at Linda, who nodded encouragingly. "My father has decided to move forward with his retirement as planned. As part of our new governance structure, the board will vote on the next CEO based on qualifications and vision for the company. Until that decision is made, I'll be serving as acting CEO to ensure stability during this transition." The announcement was met with visible relief from most of the room. Confirmation of what they had already sensed was the right path forward. "What about Kevin?" Our HR director voiced the question everyone was thinking. "What's his role now?" A fair question. Without an easy answer. Kevin remains a significant shareholder and board member. His specific executive role will be determined as part of the restructuring process. As the meeting continued, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Can't reach Kevin. His assistant says he took files from his office and left, saying he needed to fix things. Trying his apartment now." A sense of unease settled over me. Kevin, feeling cornered and desperate, with access to sensitive company information. What was he planning? The answer came 20 minutes later as we were finalizing our public statement. My phone rang. Michael Donovan. "Jennifer," he said without preamble, "we have a situation. Your brother just showed up at my office with a competing offer." My blood ran cold. "What kind of offer?" "He's proposing to sell his personal shares in Reynolds Construction, about 15% of the company, to our main competitor, Sullivan Development. He claims it would give them enough leverage, combined with some board members he says are loyal to him, to block our investment and any leadership changes." Sullivan Development. Our fiercest competitor, known for aggressive tactics and cutting corners, exactly the kind of company that would welcome Kevin's approach to business. "Can he do that?" I asked, mind racing. "Legally, maybe. It depends on your shareholder agreement restrictions. But it would create a corporate governance nightmare and potentially trigger a proxy fight for control of the company. I need to speak with our legal team. I'll call you back." I hung up and immediately pulled our general counsel aside, explaining the situation. Her expression grew increasingly grave as I spoke. "The shareholder agreement has a right of first refusal clause," she confirmed after consulting her files. "If Kevin wants to sell his shares, he has to offer them to existing shareholders first, meaning you and your father. But if he's just using this as a threat to block the Donovan deal, then we need to call his bluff," I finished. "Get the papers ready. If Kevin wants to sell his shares, we'll buy them. All of them. Dad returned as we were working through the legal details, his face drawn with worry. Kevin's not at his apartment. His neighbor says he left with suitcases this morning. He's at Sullivan Development, I said, explaining what Michael had told me. Trying to sell them his shares to block our deal with Donovan. Dad sank into a chair, the final betrayal hitting him hard. He would destroy the company out of spite? Not if we stop him, I said firmly. We have right of first refusal on his shares. If he's serious about selling, we'll buy him out. With what money? We're already bringing in Donovan because we need capital. It was a fair point. Between us, Dad and I didn't have the liquid assets to buy Kevin's shares at market value. Then we negotiate with Donovan, I decided. Adjust the deal structure. They invest the same amount but take a smaller percentage. We use the difference to buy out Kevin's shares, removing the threat permanently. Dad looked at me with newfound respect. You'd make that work? Watch me. The next few hours were a whirlwind of negotiations, legal consultations, and strategic maneuvering. Michael was receptive to the adjusted deal structure. He saw the value in removing Kevin as a wild card from the equation. Our legal team drafted the necessary paperwork for both the Donovan investment and the potential share buyout. By early evening, we had a coherent plan and a public statement ready to go. The building inspectors had completed their assessment of Pacific Heights, confirming the structural issues, but praising Reynolds Construction for proactive transparency and commitment to remediation. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. There was just one missing piece: Kevin himself. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened, and he strode onto the executive floor. He looked disheveled, his usual polish gone, eyes wild with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "Family meeting in the conference room," he announced loudly. "Now." Dad and I exchanged glances before following him. Better to handle this privately than create more drama in front of the staff. Kevin closed the conference room door behind us, tossing a folder onto the table. Sullivan's offer for my shares, 15% above market value. They signed today, we announce tomorrow, and your deal with Donovan is dead. I opened the folder, scanning the terms. It was exactly as Michael had described. A transparent attempt to block our restructuring and maintain Kevin's position. "This is your grand solution?" Dad asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Selling out to Sullivan just to spite us?" "It's business," Kevin shot back. "Isn't that what Jennifer's always preaching? Make the logical decision, not the emotional one." "There's nothing logical about this," I replied calmly. "You're sacrificing long-term value for a short-term cash grab and the satisfaction of creating chaos." "I'm protecting my interests. Sullivan appreciates what I bring to the table. They're offering me a position as executive vice president once they gain influence over Reynolds." Dad shook his head. "They're using you to get access to our projects, our clients, our proprietary methods. Once they have what they want, they'll discard you." Kevin's confidence wavered slightly. "You don't know that." "Actually, we do," I said, sliding a different folder across the table. "Our legal team prepared this in response to your offer from Sullivan. It's our right of first refusal to purchase your shares at the same price Sullivan is offering." He stared at the document, clearly not having anticipated this response. "You don't have that kind of money." "We've restructured the Donovan deal to make it work," I explained. "Same investment amount, smaller percentage stake. The difference goes to buying you out completely." Kevin leafed through the document, the reality of his situation dawning on him. "So that's it? You force me out entirely?" "Not force," Dad corrected. "Buy. At a premium. You get your money, we get to move forward without the threat of corporate sabotage hanging over us." The fight seemed to drain out of Kevin, replaced by a hollow resignation. "And what am I supposed to do? Just walk away from the family business?" For the first time, I felt genuine sympathy for my brother. Beneath the arrogance and entitlement was someone who'd tied his entire identity to Reynolds Construction, not because he loved the work as I did, but because it was the only path he'd ever considered. You take the money and find what actually fulfills you, I said softly. You've never loved construction, Kevin. You loved the status, the connections, the social aspects, but the actual work, the projects, the details, the responsibility, those have always been burdens to you, not passions. He looked up, surprise registering at my insight. And if construction is all I know? Dad stepped in. It's not. You have talents, Kevin. Real ones. Your ability to build relationships, to see opportunities where others don't. But you need to apply them in the right context, not force yourself into a role that was never meant for you. Kevin was quiet for a long moment, the weight of the decision before him visible in his posture. Finally, he reached for a pen. I want 3 conditions, he said, sounding more tired than angry now. Which are? I asked. First, the press release can't make it look like I was forced out. Say I chose to pursue other opportunities. Something like that. A reasonable request for someone concerned with saving face. Fine. Second, I want continued health insurance coverage for a year while I figure out my next steps. Dad nodded. We can arrange that. And third, Kevin hesitated. I want the family home in Aspen, not as part of the share buyout. Just, I need somewhere to regroup, and that place always meant more to me than it did to either of you. Dad and I exchanged glances. The Aspen property had been a family vacation home for years, but he was right. Neither of us used it much anymore. Done, Dad agreed. But Kevin, once you sign this, it's final. No changing your mind. No trying to interfere with Reynolds Construction's operations or relationships. A clean break. Kevin picked up the pen, his hand hovering over the signature line. You know, I really did think I could run this company, that with enough time, I'd figure it out. I believe you believe that, I said. But Reynolds Construction needs more than good intentions. It needs experienced leadership with a proven track record of results. He signed with a decisive stroke, then slid the papers back to me. Congratulations, CEO Reynolds. The company's yours. Don't screw it up. Despite everything, I found myself smiling slightly at his characteristic bluntness. I won't. As Kevin walked out of the conference room for the last time as a Reynolds Construction executive, Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly. Really ready? I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the years of proving myself, the recent weeks of fighting for what I'd earned, the challenges still ahead with Pacific Heights, the Donovan partnership, and rebuilding company morale. I've been ready for 15 years, I replied. The question is, are you ready to let me lead? Dad squeezed my shoulder. I believe I am. Finally. 2 weeks later, I stood at the podium in the Reynolds Construction main lobby, addressing the entire company for the first time as official CEO. The board vote had been unanimous, even including Dad's support, making the transition smoother than I had dared hope. Reynolds Construction stands at a pivotal moment in our history, I began, looking out at the faces of people who had built their careers alongside mine. The challenges we've faced recently have tested us, but they've also revealed our strengths, our resilience, our commitment to quality, and our integrity. I outlined the path forward. The complete remediation of Pacific Heights under new project management, the strategic partnership with Donovan Capital that would fund our expansion into sustainable construction methods, and the governance changes that would ensure decisions were made based on merit and expertise, not sentiment or tradition. Some of you have asked about Kevin, I acknowledged, addressing the whispers directly. He's decided to pursue opportunities outside construction, with our family's full support. Change is never easy, especially in a family business. But sometimes it's necessary for growth, both personal and professional. As I concluded my remarks, and the applause rose around me, I caught Dad's eye in the front row. His expression held something I'd sought for years without fully realizing it. Not just pride, but respect. The respect of seeing me clearly, not as his daughter who needed protection or guidance, but as a leader who had earned her position through demonstrated capability and unwavering principles. Later that evening, as I sat in my new office, my father's old office, reviewing the updated remediation plans for Pacific Heights, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," I called, expecting Linda or one of the project managers with a question. Instead, it was Dad, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of the single malt scotch he saved for significant occasions. I thought this milestone deserved a proper toast, he said, setting the glasses down and pouring a finger into each. "Your mother would have been proud today." I accepted the glass, the amber liquid catching the light from the window. "I hope so." "She would have," Dad insisted, taking the chair across from me. "She always saw you more clearly than I did. That girl has steel in her spine," she used to say. "She'll build something remarkable if you don't get in her way." I smiled at the memory of my mother's quiet perceptiveness. "Were you? In my way?" Dad considered this, swirling his scotch thoughtfully. "Not intentionally, but sometimes our blind spots are most profound with the people closest to us. I saw your competence, your intelligence, your drive. What I missed was your vision, your ability to see not just what Reynolds Construction is, but what it could become. And now? Now, I'm looking forward to watching you build that vision." He raised his glass. "To Jennifer Reynolds, CEO. May you lead with the wisdom I sometimes lacked." We clinked glasses, the moment marking not just a professional transition, but a personal one. A shift in how we saw each other, and perhaps more importantly, in how I saw myself. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Pacific Heights would require significant investment and careful management to recover from its structural issues. The Donovan partnership would bring new perspectives and expectations to our board. Industry competitors like Sullivan would be watching for any sign of weakness in our leadership transition. But for the first time in my career, I wouldn't be fighting against internal resistance while tackling external challenges. I had the title to match the responsibility I'd carried for years. I had a board structured to support merit-based decisions rather than family politics, and I had the satisfaction of knowing I hadn't been handed anything. I had earned every step of the journey through perseverance, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. As Dad left, me to my work, I turned to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline silhouetted against the setting sun. So many of those buildings bore the Reynolds Construction mark, tangible monuments to what we had built as a company, as a family, despite our flaws and conflicts. Now it was my turn to shape that skyline, to build structures that would stand long after the boardroom battles and family tensions had faded from memory. Not as Richard Reynolds' daughter, but as Jennifer Reynolds, CEO, a leader who had proven that true power isn't given or taken, it's earned. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.